It's always safe to start with a quote from, well, hopefully safe to start from a quote from a bishop of the Church of England. So I'm going to go with the Bishop of Salisbury, who recently argued that the health of society depends on the quality of engagement. And he went further to ask what happens when values of truth, justice, peace, mercy, and love are disrupted. Who he asked is calling that disruption out. And I think hopefully we've seen from the panel, we have some disruptors who are calling this out in a good way, but also have mentioned truth and justice, have talked about mercy, and have talked about integrity. And when Tihomir asked me about this, he specifically wanted me to touch on going forward post 2020 and around that truth and integrity, which can seem so lacking right now in a world that happens to feel at times like you are either being gaslighted or manipulated, called out, whether that's exactly like Camilla mentioned around name calling. Certainly I've been called some things around lefty or commie or whatever else you want to add. And unfortunately, she's right. Words do bring about action. In fact, here in the UK, we've seen a number of cases of counter-terror cases going before the court relating to lawyers who are immigration lawyers, because of some words that were said both from a Home Secretary and the Prime Minister relating to them being meddling do-gooder lefty lawyers. And we know where that can lead at times. And we see it obviously in the States looking at that. So I really want to look at the values we have going forward. So our panelists have mentioned things around the assumptions that we carry, the facts we deal with, and the truth. What is truth? What is our truth? What is Jesus's truth ultimately? It also argues calling out the very disruption that our bishop has just mentioned, and notions of legacy and rebuilding. Michael Weir, who is a faith advisor to Barack Obama, someone I follow and really enjoy reading from, asks us, he says, can we move away from a political spiritual harm? He argues that one of the ways that political spiritual harm does is by intentionally placing moral burden on citizens that fits the interests of political candidates, parties, and activists, but doesn't fit the nature of politics, essentially, of the way we work together, the way we seek hope and change. And generally speaking, I hope that us involved in politics want to see good change. We care. I, just before I came on this call, got a horrible message about some children who were crossing the channel, some asylum-seeking children, we presume, who drowned. And that's quite a hard thing to take on. It's quite a hard thing to understand why that happened right now in this day and age, you know, and looking at the comments straight away, horrendous comments, you know, migrant, criminal. Ultimately, as you know, Jill said, they are children. Are we pro-life? Are we pro-child in that? I would also suggest, if leadership is about practical action and the duty of government is surely to protect its citizens, we've got to worry about legacy. What's next? What's coming? What are we actually building? What, as the Bible mentions, are the seeds that we're sowing? Can we handle perhaps the monster we might create in our quest to create a legacy, or bring about the values that we're seeking? Are we aware of unintended consequences of decisions made because, well, it suited me at the end of the day? Or does it bring me closer to that seat of power, that seductive nature of power? Do we even agree on what our values look like at the end of the day? Are our values about justice, peace, mercy, and love? This morning, as is a very bad habit of mine, I checked my Twitter feed. I should probably stop doing that in the morning. But in doing so, came across a thread by someone called Clara Jeffrey. And it said, an ethical person wouldn't allow themselves to ascend to great power in an unethical fashion. Now, this was about this US Supreme Court. It was about people essentially selling themselves out to get something they wanted, or selling out a principle of law, of justice, of precedent, things that I believe in very much. It hit me hard. What does that look like for people of faith or none who are involved in politics? What does that mean for us post 2020? And where has some of the Christian church at times allowed itself to ascend to assumed, I'll say assumed power by unethical means? What about future accountability? And as I think Jack touched on, and Jill and Camilla as well, you can hold people to account, and that's good, but you can also hold them to account for accountability's sake. do we pursue an agenda? Has the church pursued an agenda at times because it feels close to that seat, because of that imagined threat that's been touched upon at times? And has it, in doing so, sometimes sowed more discord than, as Camilla talked about, peace? Has it been virtue signaling? We had a campaign here in the UK around free school meals, and a footballer took up the charge on that, and I happen to support this particular team, so I'm very proud he did that. But the Twitter feed was all about virtue signaling. They said, oh, he's just virtue signaling to protect children. He didn't actually. He was actually doing the thing he says he would. Virtue signaling would be like me going to say to you, I'm off to the gym right now, and just taking my bag and then hopping off to get a coffee or something. That's virtue signaling in that sense. So where are we going? Where is the church? Where is politics going after 2020 or even now? Are we going to just be virtue signalers? Are we going to pursue power for power's sake? Are we really all about ambition? Now, Deuteronomy 16:20 says, justice, justice shall you pursue. It's not a mistake. It does say it twice, justice, justice. The call there looks at heaven and earth, but also action and motive. If you talk to any Jewish person, they get this. They always say justice, justice. And I remember sitting in a meeting about this. We were looking at a migration issue, and a rabbi turned to me and he said, Heather, it's a justice, justice issue. And I said, what do you mean, justice, justice? And he said, it's about righteousness. It's about what we do, and it's about what our heart is doing, that motive. Justice, justice. It's doubly important what the church does. It's doubly important how we act and what we say and what we do and who we hold to account. Perhaps the use of the word justice means that we cannot pursue justice without being righteousness. Righteous, as I said. Righteous, right relationship with God, right relationship with one another. It's not a single concept, and maybe we've lost that a little bit. Do we disrupt those who seek to undermine justice, justice? Do we call it out? Would this be a cry post 2020? In a word of a song I quite like, where do you want to go? How much do you want to risk? Are we looking for somebody with a superhuman gift? In a quest for legacy, how much are we willing to sacrifice? Are we looking for our little messiahs with those superhuman gifts? What is it actually we want in society? What would be a legacy for our leaders? Is it one where character assassination just takes primacy, or erosion of trust in experts and the rule of law? Is it a rule of law that we can pick and choose? Is it international law that we can pick up and put down when it suits us? Or is it about actually loving and caring and looking out for our neighbour? So why was it the other day when I woke up with a total sense of relief and excitement when I watched the Prime Minister of New Zealand give her election winning speech? It wasn't because, and I'm going to out myself here, I'm a member of the Labour Party and we don't win very much, but it was an excitement because of what she was saying. Let's not be torn apart by elections. Let's listen to one another. Let's go deeper. Let's learn to see the other's perspective. That doesn't mean rolling over, but it does mean doing it with due care and actually believing that one another is made also in the image of God. Do we go deeper? Can we question, where is the love? One of my favorite scriptures is Isaiah, and I'm going to come to a close in a moment and open it up for our debate that Tihimir will take forward. But one of my favorite scriptures is from Isaiah, and it says, you will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up age-old foundations. You will be called the repairer of broken walls and a restorer of streets and dwellings. That's great. But what happens when we don't all agree if something needs to be restored? What happens if we're not sure how to restore that? That's something we need to work through to go further. In a sermon by the Bishop of York, he looked at a positive from the crisis. He looked at that rebuilding and mentioned William Temple. William Temple became an archbishop, and he, during the Second World War, in the midst of rubble, in the midst of dissolution, he dreamed of what peace would look like and how devastated cities could be rebuilt. He was one of the moral architects of a post-war consensus that gave birth to a welfare state and to the National Health Service. a concept born out of devastation and crisis, so needed, especially today. And I might cheekily add, in reference to Camilla, that there's nothing communist about believing in a healthcare free-for-all at the point of use. Will our rebuilding and believing and leading care for the vulnerable? Will we be seeking to save the oppressed and promote empathy and compassion? And because I love him so much, I'm going to end on the Bishop of York as well. As quickly as Christ sets us free from all the self-made constructions of separation, the willful pride of the human hearts that builds them up again. This is why the Church of Jesus Christ must and does confront division and oppression today. People of faith should embody moral and intellectual integrity, not cruelty, not power for power's sake. And I would add, nor set themselves up as any type of Messiah, but they should instead act as a nation's chief servant.